On to the Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 work session, an executive session. I'll ask you all to rise for invocation and pledge. Ms. Knight, would you lead us in prayer?
Yes. May we pray for you. Most holy and everlasting Father, thou art God and God alone. Father, we come to you today to tell you thank you for allowing us to get together to do the business of the city of Hartsville that we love so much. Father, we ask you right now to go into the places war-torn, Ukraine. Lord, please give us peace. Give us peace in our nation, in our world, in our cities and states. Father, we ask you that you continue to keep us in your care, all of our staff, all of our first responders, all of our council members and mayor. Father, when you do all these things, we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we all be blessed. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to again remind everyone, because we've talked about streaming the work sessions, this is being streamed. Just so you know, we're going to move forward as we go forward. All of our meetings will be streamed for public consumption later on. Just FYI, that's all. So as we move into it, let's go ahead and talk about the latest ARPA, the Course of American Rescue Plan Act. You should have in your packet the latest final interim rule, and then also kind of a brief summary of what's going on. But the main purpose of this is that we really need to schedule a ARPA discussion day, much like our budget workshop, but a little bit smaller scale, to talk about what council has in mind. Staff has had recommendations, but of course, council has to allocate these funds. We have until 2024 to obligate, and we have until 2026 to spend. And of course, we've got $3.8 million, and we've already spent $400,000 on premium pay. We have another 300 or so in grant matches that we've obligated, and that has, the opportunities have increased with the latest rulings from ARPA, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we have $100,000 in the Canal District. So all in all, we have about $800,000 we've spent, and we have another $3 million that is available to us to spend.
What was that last $100?
What's that? 100 Canal District.
Okay, thank you.
And so, again, this is one-time money. We're not going to get it back. This should not be used for anything that's going to be recurring. Definitely, things like that. But the uses have expanded to almost anything that the city could typically spend money on. And so that's what, after kind of pushing and prodding by different counties and councils and cities, that's what's going to happen. So a lot of stuff has been opened up. So pretty much if you want to spend it, so if we have a one-time use, that would be useful to give. Again, I think the emphasis should be on infrastructure. We have an aging infrastructure. We have a capital improvement plan with almost $13 million worth of things that have to be done. We don't use all those, the money towards it though. There are certain ways we can spend money with state revolving funds, those type of things. So let's be smart about how we spend it. But I plan on having an in-depth conversation about each of those projects. I'd like to do it if you guys are available either this month on the 15th or the last week, the last Tuesday of the month, which is the 26th or 7th, I believe. Or it could be, we have 5 Tuesdays this month, so we're very lucky.
15th, the 22nd, or 29th?
The 22nd, we'll be in Charlotte for the regional international was it shopping and consumer group, whatever, ICSC. So we'll be in Charlotte pitching the city of Hartsville again, so we'll be absent. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't meet, but other staff will have to represent that. So I'd like to do that before the budget workshop in April. That way we can start getting some things together. And again, these monies don't necessarily have to be in this budget year, but we should start thinking about it and have a tentative plan, I think, in place as we move forward through the rest of 2022. So, any questions on that right now? Do you guys have any questions reading some of the documents? Or
Equipment too, or just?
Equipment 2 has now been released. So equipment, it pretty much, if you remember from last time, it pretty much is almost anything the city can spend money on. We still have lost revenues we can collect. Equipment, so vehicles, if it's related to, essentially related to COVID or public safety and health, that's what we do. And at this point, we can really justify almost anything. The only caveat is anything over $1 million, which is only 3 projects potentially for us, has to be justified with a written justification. Everything else is just justified in our quarterly reports.
We did Darlington or Florence one day last week, put in the paper, they put in 7 figures, I think, of their money in infrastructure.
Yes.
Or the roadways or.
Yep. Yeah, Darlington, so they got their money first. So of the counties in the 17 cities, we were in the non-entitlement group, and there was an entitlement group. The entitlement group got their money from the feds directly. It was based on population of counties, so they didn't have to wait on the state to give us any money. So they actually put out a plan tentatively immediately when they first got the money, and a lot of it was geared towards infrastructure. Darlington, excuse me, got over $10 million. And so we, yes, so they have a plan they're doing, and I think it's, yeah, I think it would be definitely beneficial for us to, if you have any requests, to start making them now to the county, engage with your counterparts in the county council, discuss those things, and get them thinking about Hartsville, because we were part of that 10 million.
Has county council got to vote on theirs?
They're starting to vote on these things, and they are starting to obligate. But they have not come to talk to us, yes.
So Darlington County got 10 million, or the city of Darlington got?
Darlington County.
Okay,
that's
yeah.
it. Darlington City, I think, got a little under 3.
That's what I wanted.
So, yeah.
We got
The county's making decisions.
So we really need
Talk
to
them.
Right.
hit Kirk and David and,
However,
I would
yeah,
recommend.
we need to get him in hard. 'Cause we
Yeah,
know-
and if you have any recommendations I can take directly to Charles, please let me know, and I can do that too, but I think we should have concerted effort as we move forward. But definitely the county, and we're
Yeah.
part of that.
I'd like to see them buy into the entry rates into the various cities and towns and,
There are a few
County.
counties in the state that actually, and I know of one, potentially 2, I have to look at the names, but they just gave the money directly to the cities proportionally. That's not gonna happen here. But, that's just, it's the county, I think we need to engage and talk to them about it.
yeah.
So, but, yeah.
Yeah, Charles ain't gonna, I mean, I shouldn't say, but he's not gonna go for that.
Well, he might, let's talk to him about it, I think.
Well, he might, but we just continue to battle with the council members about different things,
Mhm.
Daniel, and, we just can't seem to see eye to eye.
I think there's got to be something that we can agree on that's going to be good for the county and good for the city.
Absolutely.
And it might be the gateways, it might be,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but
Yeah,
there's got to be
industrial park,
something that
yeah,
we've got
something like
mutual
that.
interest
Yeah,
in.
there's definitely interest.
Well,
in-
some better than none, so
It's true.
whatever they wanna share with us, we,
And growth outside the city still benefits us.
Yeah.
I love to, I'm the first one to say I want to annex it and capture that, business license and that, but a job creator outside the city limits is still very successful for us, and that's that partnership we need to do. I mean, it's not just, we don't have to put our borders up and then close a gate, but we can reach outside and shake hands, so.
yeah.
But I definitely encourage you, if you have, to definitely talk with them about it, see what they're thinking. And they have time like we have time, but it's gonna quickly, as we move forward, as projects come up, just like us. For instance, one of the projects that is now eligible for funding, which I wholly recommend, is the $900,000 match that we have already obligated ourselves to with the FEMA grant. So that's a $3.8 million, almost the exact cost of what we got from the feds for the state. That's gonna be infrastructure improvements for stormwater down 9th Street ditch in that area. And so we have a $900,000 obligation we have to do already. And that's gonna come out directly from our utilities fund unless we can find a way to fund it, either through stormwater or from ARPA funding.
I think we need to look again at stormwater runoff fees. That's, ongoing. It's, you don't wait for the next project. You got money in the bank. And,
What?
It did fund the Bob Braddock retention fund behind Carolina School, so, that was good.
There's different ways to do that too. I mean, for instance, when I was in Goose Creek, Berkeley County had a stormwater fee that they charged to all county residents, and then we met as a group and assigned projects out of that fund, so we were able to do more with less. So every 3 years, a project rolled around to Goose Creek, and then the next year, we helped fund projects in the city of Moncks Corner or things like that. There's different ways to do it where the citizens of Hartsville, again, because we only have 7,400 residents, having to bear that burden by themselves when largely we're talking about state issues, we're talking about county issues, private issues. And so there's opportunities there. But I definitely think we should discuss that at some point.
Because we already had at one time a, what was it, $4 stormwater fee?
Yeah.
3 or so, yeah. 4
Some-
or so.
Yeah, and you know, that money funded a few things, and then, you know, we were waiting for the letter, and the letter never come, and we did away with it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't think the issues are gonna go away.
No.
You know, whether we're gonna be required to do it or not, but, you know, we need to be
But we have to-
proactive on
Yeah, but
having
we
a
have to be
reserve
correct
there.
and make sure that it's written correctly so
Mhm.
that it will address stormwater.
Yeah, I agree. Every project does it. It shouldn't qualify.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else for ARPA? Before we get into, we're gonna have, again, an in-depth conversation about this as we go forward.
And you said on the 9th, can you repeat what you said about the 9th Street and FEMA?
Yes, ma'am. So we already have a stormwater grant through FEMA. It's $3.8 million. It's targeting a section of 9th Street going from south to north.
No,
And is that-
9th Street goes east-west.
No,
No,
the
no.
9th Street
North
ditch.
south. The ditch.
On 9th Street?
Yes.
It goes north-south.
North-south.
Yes, north-south.
So beginning point and end point.
It starts, I believe, closer to, or is it 5th and 6th Street? It's that corridor. Excuse me, not 9th Street, 5th and 6th Street, 6th Street corridor. And it hits separate sections of the South Park area. It stops as we get closer to Crestwood, and then it targets some various areas. It's targeting issues that, for low-lying ditches that were turned from irrigation ditches that were turned into irrigation pipes and things like that, that just don't flow. It also hits some areas over by the post office and things like that.
Yeah,
And this was, I believe you guys looked at this in 2018 or 19?
yes.
It's been a while,
several
and
years.
we got the money, and now the city is obligated to pay the 20% match of it. What I'll do is, let me send out, we had at one point shown you guys a map of where every issue is. Let me send it out again, so you guys can see exactly what we're targeting. That way, we can all talk about it again. But that is something that we have to fund. We've obligated ourselves to fund it, or else we risk losing the entire package. But we can phase it, too.
What was the timeline on that?
We're looking, it just was released, we had in this year's budget to start phase 1. But again, things are just slow right now, because we are working through FEMA, it's the contractor work, and some stuff we can do. But we haven't been able to get it started on it. We probably, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get it done even phase 1 started this year.
Yeah, it could be toward the end of the year,
Yeah.
because we released the drainage study to FEMA, and then we had to do a cost-benefit analysis for FEMA, and now we're waiting on them to present us with a new grant award and
Right.
paperwork.
Things are moving slowly, and also the issue that is gonna be the major talking point of our budget is just costs are skyrocketing. Pipes are 5 times, PVC pipes and things like that. It's just ridiculous. And I mean, staff and I are talking about, is this a good time to maybe hold off on some projects that aren't essential in favor of waiting for things like that? But that's a budget conversation as we go forward. But there is some stuff we have to get moving on already.
And do we check and see if we use PVC or the, I don't know what you call it, the concrete tiles, I call it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, concrete, but that cost everything has just gone up. All the production has gone up.
But what I'm asking are they looking at
Oh, no.
PVC versus concrete?
A lot of them are not, I'm not sure, there's a whole scope of each one, and everyone's different depending on what it is. A lot of it's elevation issues. Some are as simple as just clearing out the muck and the buildup, the sediment buildup that's been built up over years. There's not a lot of tiling, as we call it, where you're putting a pipe in and covering it, because that just jumps the cost up. So we're doing as many low-cost fixes as we can. And this is just dealing with certain portions of the city. The whole city still has to be addressed. Stormwater is it says no issues around Sunoco, it doesn't handle issues in Crestwood. And throughout South Hartsville, still not there is a target, Richmond Circle. So we have still have a lot more to do. And again, these are not all the city's issues. These are issues, but they are citizen issues. So stormwater, it looks like needs to be a conversation that probably could have its own day to talk about.
Exciting times.
Right.
Mr. Manager, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The ARPA meeting on the 15th or the 29th, what time frame are you looking at? A 10 to 12 or?
It doesn't need to be.
As they're looking at the calendars.
Yeah, I would say probably a 10 to 2, unless we provide it again. Again, we just need to get a general idea of where we want to start doing it. If you have any projects, and we'll recommend some projects from our capital improvement list that are already kind of a little bit vetted at the point. But there's opportunities now that have expanded that to spend on other things that we need, again, one-time purchases. So
And when will you all be out of town?
the 20, the in between that. the
22nd.
22nd.
Okay.
So it'll either be the 15th or the 29th.
Right.
A 10 to 2 meeting is what we're looking at. Or another time if you prefer, we can do 8 to 12.
No, that's fine, I just want to make sure you will be here
Yes, ma'am.
and staff.
Okay.
I'll send out an email invite so you can let me know.
Anything else, Veronica? Who wants to take lead now? Casey, you want to take it?
Sure.
I'll hand it.
Thanks, Casey, and I apologize everyone for being extremely tardy. But good morning.
Morning.
Okay, moving on to recapping our
Yeah.
strategic planning.
So what I did is I just provided, so again, I think, thank you all for your input. I thought it was a really great meeting, strategic planning session. As you can see, we got some, viable kind of tangible projects out of that meeting. A lot of them have to be resolved. The first three, of course, are dealing with the Marion Cemetery on Campbell Street, historic Butler District, talking about 6th Street. City entrance signs was given a presentation from the group. Code of ordinances, city program evaluation update, new city website, Main Street expansion, Lake City Parks, and the industrial park. So those are the 9 that kind of got talked about the most. Some people might have a little smaller list or even bigger list. But I wanted to see if you guys had any more comments about that, if you want us to move forward with selecting these, and just go ahead and developing a formal strategic plan for the next fiscal year, and knocking off and saying that our goal is to have these projects started or completed in this by the end of next fiscal year.
I think, like 1 through 3 are in the same general area of the city, so it makes sense that those would be grouped
Okay.
together, and maybe some others that would go into that.
Sure, and not all of these require a lot of investment, For instance, city codes evaluations, we'll be just tackling that over the next year. We'll make recommendations and bring them to council for votes and ordinance changes. The Campbell Street, Marion Avenue Cemetery, the only expense I want to do immediately is designing it and then taking it and seeking whatever state funds we can get to help offset those costs in partnerships with like the school district or things like that for Campbell Street specifically. So a lot of these might not cost as much as we think, which is great. I love that. So.
Daniel, Bryson and I, after we met, I rode down Campbell the next morning, and I called Bryson when I was finishing up, because we're responsible for some of it, regardless of how it unfolds.
Yeah.
Even if we do our part on the main entrance, I think that'll, like you said, if we get the design and go ahead and let's push the button for that, that'll help him or help the traffic itself when they do go in there for a visitation or a funeral itself, because it's in rough.
Yeah.
Rough
No, I agree.
shape.
And I
Last
mean,
Thursday was a good example.
really.
Marion had to put traffic in the cemetery, not accessible on the far Campbell Street side.
Wow.
That was a good example. So you had 2 services at one time, almost in the same area,
Right.
but due to excess issues, you just had a simple midday congestion is what it was.
Well, we have the portions that we own, definitely we can start looking at. The stuff we're doing immediately is we're already calling title work on the Campbell Street, on any of the areas around there. We need to find out who owns what. And we're also looking the same thing with the Marion Cemetery. We're going to do a survey of the area so we know exactly where the boundary lines are. So there's work that we're going to get started, and then we're going to have the plans developed and drawn up so we can have something to present to the state.
I think the city did a plat of the Marion Avenue Cemetery.
Do we have one that's updated?
Several years back, maybe
Oh,
16 or so.
Oh, that's perfect, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was not
I
a
wasn't
historic plat, it was a more recent plat.
Right, I just need the boundary line, so if that's still current, then we're.
Yeah, I
perfect.
think so.
That's one less thing we have to do. But, while we do that, though, we can start making plans to do our portion if we need to, and then, but there might be opportunities to just get the whole thing done at once.
Okay.
While everything's mobilized.
And then making sure this year we definitely look into the Main Street expansion.
Yep.
Somehow, some way.
Okay, well, that, again, I think, I talked it over with Lauren, and she's at actually at a conference, not a conference, she's part of a Zoom meeting that's talking about expansion in areas and things like that, and economic development. I think the thing we need to talk about is look at those boundaries and see where you think council, I'm talking about, thinks that they should expand to. Main Street, you can still join Main Street if you're not a member. And you do have to pay, you pay an increased cost, but the counter to that was thought, if you're in B1, you're already paying an increased cost because you're in the B1 Parking Beautification District, so there was kind of a cost savings. So I just need to get some recommendations from you guys. We can certainly see where you want to stop, what you want to do, where you want to include, and start maybe planning, like Bobby said, do we want to start planning for how we expand our downtown, which I think is a good option, so.
Have we audited to find out how many businesses are along the 6th Street corridor?
I don't think we've done one recently, but we definitely can do a quick count. We'll look at business licenses and find out. Absolutely. And you got to think, I mean, what do you want Main Street to mean? What do you want it to do? What are you trying to accomplish when you're expanding it and you're trying to include people? We have a chamber that's active too, so what do you want the Main Street's role to be? And maybe that's a good time to look at that too. Because we are kind of in a rebuilding with Main Street. We're looking, we have fresh blood in there. We're really getting after and being very active with what we do. We do a lot of ribbon cuttings for Main Street. So if we want to expand that out, and anyone can really have a Main Street ribbon cutting, so to speak, but just whether or not you're a Main Street in the district member or out of district member, you're still part of Main Street. So there's an opportunity, what I'm saying.
Because along the, starting at the 5th Street, 6th Street corridor, coming, the 5th Street side is good.
Right.
But on the 6th Street corridor, you can immediately see the difference.
Right.
And we rode that, the mayor and I, with Councilman Rice,
Yes, ma'am.
and was able to show him properties where demolition had occurred and lots are now vacant. And also, that used to be a hub for black-owned business, all along 6th Street.
Right.
And some new businesses have opened up on 6th Street. So we look at the businesses that are there, make sure they're licensed properly, taxes, look at all that. And the city also has some properties that it has some interest in on 6th Street.
Right, sure.
So that those properties don't get away to someone that would not care for them as a city would.
You're referring to like property maintenance and things like that?
Yes.
And that's
and
part of
private
it.
acquisition.
Yes, ma'am. And that's, as we talked about, and I think that's part of the, as we look into the historic Butler District and doing a revitalization of that, that's the money we've already looked into for, we have to, so the CDBG grant that we have right now active, we had to do an extension because the pipes coming into the lift station, or not the pipes, the pumps, were delayed because of everything going on with costs, so we had to do extensions. So we have to wait to do to pull another grant down until that's done. So it does give us more time to fully study the area. So the $20,000 that we did put in the budget, we can use that towards doing preliminary workforce study, which is going to be looking at potentially doing a quick mock-up of what it might look like, so that we have something to take to a group to say, what I'm talking about is uplifting the streetscape to provide on-street parking, to provide things like that, giving access to businesses that, but again, all that needs to be talked about with the community and see
Yes.
what we need. That's part of it. I think that's part of a Main Street discussion and not, there's pros and cons to expanding Main Street past typical Main Street areas. Some cities have done Main Street for the entire city, and I think there's pros and cons to that too. So I think it's just worth, let's get the boundaries, get it back to us so we can bring it on a map. Let's bring it back to you guys and discuss it and go forward.
And of course, have the public input on
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, sure. We're moving forward again, the city entrance signs. That group is really moving, is really excited to get going. I met with them. My only recommendation to them, they're very interested in doing fundraising. And my only kind of caveat, which I kind of spoke, and we can talk about, is that any type of sponsorship shouldn't be on the sign that says "Welcome to the City of Hartsville," and we are in charge of the design for it. So the city has but I did kind of give them a little leeway as far as they wanted to make recommendations for some landscaping, things like that, how they would like to do it. If there's a particular tree or bush that someone's very fond of, it could be presented by Sonic or whatever, and just move from there. But it gives some opportunities to have be recognized on the site, but not necessarily permanently on the sign. I just didn't think Welcome to the City of Hartsville presented by North Industrial would look very good. So that's what we're going for. But they want to get moving, so we're going to start doing some mock-up design work to bring to you guys, so you guys can start thinking about it, and then we have to figure out, of course, the cost.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
speaking of what you meant about giving them some leeway with landscaping, well, one thing I'm learning about Hartsville, that's great, but they should keep it low maintenance.
Absolutely.
Because
Yes.
people come with these great ideas, and this thing get out of hand, nobody want to go back and take care of it.
Yeah.
So think about what kind of vegetation you're gonna put there, keep it low maintenance. We don't want to grow them wild, so that's one caveat you might want to put in there. Hey, okay,
Well, luckily,
consider that.
Well, luckily, so we put members in our in the leadership Hartsville class every year. We try to do at least 2 a year, and one of them happens to be our arborist. And so I've told him he can design the landscaping because he would be the one doing it for the city anyway.
Right, yeah.
So we kind of dodged the bullet there, but I explained to them, the cost is not the sign. It's not just the sign, rather. It is the landscaping, the maintenance, what you're asking, any expansion of our water lines, that type of thing. We have to consider all that. And understand that you might be donating, you want to donate for the sign, but maybe you're really just donating for that landscaping to be increased, or to be undone. And everything has to be, of course, that we can maintain it, easy for us to maintain, prefer native species so they do well here. If they print something from, Dubai, that's not gonna work here, so. But they're well, again, we have a good person working on that with them, so it's good.
And Daniel,
Mhm.
when you looked at, or the 5th Street, 6th Street, entrance,
Mhm.
did you see that was a triangle
Yeah.
from the store
Mhm.
that enclosed the, Welcome Hartsville sign on that side?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, the road that kind of came out at one point.
Yeah, it actually still shows a triangle,
Right.
and the Welcome to City Hartsville sign is in that triangle.
Yes, yeah, and we
So-
own that, the city actually owns that piece of property, which is good. So, that's the first one, that's the main one they want to work on. The other ones that are going to take longer are the 4th Street one, since that's already down, so now we can go through DOT approvals again, and that can be a bit of a bear. It's a lengthy process, about a year or so. And then the same thing with the roundabouts, with another one they said, I said, I'm not sure if they will be able to do that, but maybe the roundabout's not the best place for a sign, maybe we should push it back out to where,
If you do it at the roundabout, you want a low sign.
You do, I mean, they do say you can't have anything over, and that's why there's been no landscaping through it, although you go to like Hilton Head, and it's a literal forest in between it, so I don't know
Concrete
quite.
fountain.
Yeah, I mean, a fountain would be a great asset, and maybe the mayor, or the mayor's new statue or something, so, something simple, we could try that, but.
Now, people here still learning how to use a roundabout. They still learning how to use a roundabout.
They hit the sign.
They don't know the
regularly.
concept about the roundabout.
All it takes is one person to go airborne. That's all it takes.
I don't yield, I stop.
Fair enough. And thank you for that. All right. But that's, is there anything else on here that you guys really have a burning passion for? The website, I think it's something definitely we should look into. I definitely want to keep the costs as low as possible this year as we move forward, but is that something you want us to move forward with?
Yeah, I think
I
we
think
need
the
to,
website.
Okay.
you know, regularly look at the website and, things get out of date very quickly.
Right.
You know, like 6 months.
And the company that hosts and maintains the software and security on the website needs a little bit of money to do some updates.
Gotcha.
It's pretty far behind as far as maintenance and security updates, and it would be good for us to spend that little bit of money and let them get it
Understood.
current.
Yeah, and part of the excitement about adding a new marketing position is that now time to have someone go down there and make edits.
Mhm.
Things like that. Another tool tip, that's great.
Oh,
I just want to say, so this is where,
Right, so that was the old road, so this needs to be updated because that's no longer there.
Right.
I know exactly.
I just wanted to add that in the Green Lawn and Marion Avenue project, I'd like to work Magnolia in there as well to update and repair the fence and anything else that cemetery needs to.
Sure, I think that's fair. Marion Cemetery, I think is, if you want to look at cemeteries as kind of separate projects, I would see Marion Cemetery as a historic kind of preservation
Yeah,
project.
that's the most unique.
The other ones are more like Green Lawn and Magnolia are more general city maintenance that we need to look into. That's how I would frame them, but I would kind of keep them together because if there's opportunity to get funding, I'll go after it. But no, I understand, yeah.
It is just Green Lawn and Magnolia and
For
Marion.
the two, I believe that's enough, yeah.
Yeah, there's no other city cemeteries, right? That's it.
Well, and Marion Avenue is really not a city, city cemetery, it's not
Yeah.
owned by the city, but we can maintain it. You know, it's okay.
And if anyone's interested in investing in one, we're welcome to sell them because, no, it's something that, you know, we need to continue to maintain. We do have a contract that comes up again next year for renewal, so if we do have anybody else who wants to do it, we're gonna send it out for bid. Because at this point, you know, we need to continue to make sure those are kept up to the highest standard because the citizens deserve that.
and with the Marion Avenue Cemetery, we do not want to see it go back with the article that Johnny sent out. It is very high in the nation right now.
Sure.
That African-American cemeteries are being, historic African-American
Right.
cemeteries are being looked at.
Right.
And we are pretty far down the road on the spectrum, the level that ours is.
Right.
And so any funding that we put there, any help that we can get from the state through our legislative delegation, they've expressed concern about that. I think that's a win-win. And also find some way for the city to be able to adopt this cemetery, maybe for perpetual care, because if we don't, it will just revert back to what it was or worse.
Sure.
So I would like to see that.
I think that, you know, we can look at the perpetual care. I think the commitment will still remain the same because we do pay towards the maintenance of that and the volunteer groups. But let me see what qualifies and what doesn't qualify for perpetual care and what can qualify from that funding source. But
And you
I
might
think,
want to look again at the Tricora Foundation's report on the Marion Avenue Cemetery. They had a take that was different than Marty Drigger's take on
Okay.
ownership.
okay,
I don't know, I'm not smart enough to figure out who is right or whether, you know, eventual ownership by the city is a path or not, but they had a different viewpoint
Yes.
of that. So, you know,
let's
something
get a
that,
second opinion.
maybe a tiebreaker or something.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's,
Okay. And then the last two, the Link City Parks, look at doing, connecting those and getting those mapped out for everyone, and getting that posted. That's a very easy one to do. And the industrial park, again, is something I think should be mentioned and allocated. Again, it's one of those things we can work with the county on maybe. Maybe some of those ARPA funds can go to take care of that and do some things out there. So any other projects, the ones I have some other ones listed down there that did get some talking time, airtime, but not as much? Do you want to wait, do you want to push these for this year? I'd love to try and consolidate this down a little bit by combining some to get maybe really good, at the most, maybe 5 really solid ones I could do, and maybe some of these don't actually have to be in the strategic plan, but just something we work on. Is it okay if I start doing that, or do you want us to look at it? So when I present the final draft.
On the potential projects, Daniel,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to see the affordable housing and habitat housing requirements. I'd like to see that changed as soon as possible.
Okay.
Because we don't, Habitat does not come before council when they get ready to build, or, you know, and we don't know when they build.
Right.
But we do waive some fees on licensing or whatever it is. We need to know so that we can get those properties up on a foundation.
Well, and so those type of things, again, like I mentioned, we're working on that now. I don't necessarily, I guess with the strategic plan, do we need to actually include it as an action item that city council wants staff to work on? We're working on those things right now anyway. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we really need like 4 to 5 points that the city can then look to say, point to and say, we're working on these directly as a city. These are our goals. While keeping in mind that, like, for instance, the city swim program, we're already engaging back with YMCA to talk about that, but not necessarily as a citywide goal type thing. But habitat housing, I could rope that into the codes review.
I think
That
that's
way
the
it
way
is
to go.
mentioned, but it's not specifically tied as a number 4 bullet point, we're gonna handle this. Because affordable housing, I think, as we talked about last time, is an ongoing need. We just had a planning commission meeting last night with 40 units that are going, that potentially could go with a rezone that's gonna come to you guys next week for a rezoning application. I believe it's next week. We're gonna do that. It's gonna be on the
Maybe
agenda?
next week.
Good deal. So that planning commission made a recommendation to rezone the property behind the Anderson Animal Hospital for 40 units.
Behind where?
Anderson Animal Hospital,
Yeah.
next up to Diamond, all that area.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's 40 kind of townhouse units, Chandler cottages type style. And so we need more of that. So affordable housing goes beyond, you know, it's every type of housing. So I think that's just something we're focusing on anyway. But we
Okay,
can move it up.
we go back to your question about the potential projects.
Yeah.
I feel like we can keep all 4 kind of like on the table.
Yeah, on the table. So these are not being
Yeah,
nixed.
because
They're
I
just
still
being-
get pushback on certain things.
Gotcha. Well, what I'll do is understand that we're still considering these and that these could be still just kind of kept in next year when we go through, or even mid-year. We can say, we could look at maybe doing an adaptive program. If a grant comes up for a park, maybe we could do something like that. So that's all I wanted to mention those because they were talked about.
Daniel, during the pandemic, has the grant awarding changed any at all? Are they still has it tightened purse strings at all, or are they still
For
business
parks and
as
things like
usual?
that, as far as I can tell, the state programs are business as usual. Again, it's just the costs. I think this next year, everyone's taking a hard look at projects that were estimated in 2020 are now almost triple the cost they were now, and it's only going to go up. So I think that what's going to happen is it's going to have the same amount of money, but now less are going to be able to get it. And so that's the only thing that's really, I don't think purses are being tightened. I think it's just, there's just not enough money to go around much anymore. And that's just the perceived future right
You get
now.
less for the same amount of money.
And that's unless they decide to obligate more funding. That's,
Do we have a specific grant writer, or is that department?
so we have
Hey,
Shannon is our specific grant writer, Shannon.
Okay.
But she does get assistance, so Lauren writes tourism grants, Mark Blair writes police grants.
Because I knew Jeff used to write
Yeah.
fire ones. a good
Exactly,
bit.
and Jeff goes up, but Shannon essentially maintains the paperwork on all of them. But we do go after as many as we can. I'd like to go after more.
Yeah.
And that's, right now, it's a matter of manpower, so we're getting those things. But I'm working on trying to find ways to expand that manpower. Not
Is
with
there,
more bodies, but more.
is there a
hands-on.
list and a definition of the grant?
Yeah.
Where we could go and kind of look as though we might be able to use that or that?
Not all together
Yeah.
like that, but because it'd be a USDA, CDBG, state grants, park grants, federal grants, FAA grants. We go after everything. If you look in your back of your packet, you'll see we have about 8 grants active right now.
Good.
That we're looking through. And we go after very, very smaller ones, reimbursement grants from like municipal association, things like that. The thing to remember is that grants aren't free. It's a grant, but it's typically a match. And so some cities can apply to police and fire, and public service at a time when we typically have to go, this is this year, this is that year, because that's just our funding. But those type of questions as we go forward, definitely if you see something, you hear something, it interests you, send it on our way, because either we have already seen it and we've already seen it, we've vetted it, and we can go after we can, or we haven't seen it. So please send us anything if you hear anything.
Hey, get up. I don't want to take a lot of time, but let's go back to this potential project near on 14th Street.
Yeah,
They're already
sure.
looking at it. Are they in the city limits or
It
is
is.
it being annexed?
It already is in the city
Yeah,
limits.
because you jogged my memory, 'cause I got a call about that.
Yeah, so
How do people feel about it? I already had a community.
They did. They had a great showing from the community. A lot of people live on the street. The overall feedback was that they were not upset about the housing at all. Houses going in are great. They understood that. Traffic is the main concern. And, when you talk about a unit being added, typically it's about 10 trips per day. And then, so that's per house is what our average is out to be. Some are more, some are less. The issue that we have with 14th Street, I think, is more in the relief valves later on, going on 151 and then also Washington Street. During peak traffic, which is in the morning and in the afternoon during school, it gets very congested and the residents are very concerned about that, and they came to speak against it. That's not necessarily the developer's responsibility to fix that. And they were concerned because this is a rezoning going from a planned development, planned district area that actually allows a higher density to a less dense R2. So actually this is a good move because they could develop it right now and it wouldn't have to go before the planning commission for other than site plan work, and we wouldn't have a reason to deny it. So what we were going to do, and the planning commission made a recommendation, which you'll see in your notes, is to encourage DOT or the developer to provide a traffic study so that we can start planning to have some work done with a light or things like that, and make a recommendation to DOT. But the 14th Street area is just one of the many areas. That area, there are two road streets, expansion's happening out there, and the infrastructure is not keeping up. That's really kind of a state issue, not a city issue. But we need to advocate on that behalf. But a traffic study will definitely help see ways we can improve maybe timing at the traffic light at 14th Street. Isn't there a traffic light there where it gets 151?
Well, it's 14 to 150.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a stop sign, but are people actually using it? Does it need a traffic light there? So there's many different ways to, at Washington. So, and one of the major complaints was kind of self-inflicted. They don't like our crossing guard because the person is very generous to people coming out of the roads and
Well, I mean,
protecting this kid. But
that's their job, and where you lose, 10 seconds.
well,
If they make you wait.
Johnny, we're talking minutes. That's, listen, and I feel for them, I understand that, and they're concerned about safety, which of course is there, but this is not an issue for the rezoning, it's an issue just in general for that whole area. And of course, they brought up Neptune Island, but they said, actually, it's not that bad, because it's all just traffic throughout the random day. And I said, well, they're all going to Neptune Island anyway, so it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to Neptune Island, so it's great.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. But that will come before you next week.
Okay, thank you.
I know the,
Crossing guard afternoon off the chain.
the Bells would probably recommend a stoplight at the
She was
Washington
there.
Street intersection. Yeah.
She spoke and she volunteered to do traffic study, so I'm buying her a clicker next week. And she's gonna
Did
do
she
it.
say how many times people have run into their house?
She mentioned it a few times.
I know it's more than one. Yeah.
Yeah, she's,
And
people
we heard
drive
our
through her
family
house.
neighbor's house.
And the neighbors over
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
And the last thing we did was had somebody go out, because I went out and looked at it, and the stop sign had greenery cuts or whatever, wrote all up to the
Yeah.
stop sign, and I asked them if they could put like a reflective strip
Mhm.
from the bottom of the stop sign down to the road so that people could actually see.
We did put some respective tape on one of, she had a power line, or power pole head, so we put that down there for her, so she was very pleased with that. But they were very agreeable and understandable, they just were concerned about traffic.
Yeah,
And
sure. I think the
understand.
part for rolling stop is, just,
When you got that Carolina squat, you know, it's a little tough sometimes.
Well, we're gonna be getting rid of that hopefully soon.
I'm looking forward to it, although I just discovered mine to be done, so, you know, it's tough.
But another area like that is at the end of Summer Street,
Yes, ma'am.
in the 400 block, in the 9th Street ditch. Ooh, boy,
Yeah.
I've seen a bunch of them go down in there.
Well, as we started talking through it, they started saying, well, let's require a traffic study for this street and this street. I said, well, guys, this is not the developer's responsibility to fix the traffic of the city. Now, there could be recommendations for the developer to put in a turn lane at their property to have some, you know, there are things site-specific they can do. And much to their, you know, chagrin, they did not like that, but that's what the planning commission has every right to make, and planning and staff have every right to make as zoning administrators, and make a requirement for the rezone. Now, they just made a recommendation, but that's, as we get through the site plan, that's what we're gonna do. So, we have some time on this. This is just a rezoning, and again, this is actually a less dense use of that property than what it could be. So you could put apartments or something in there if the PD allowed. I think it did allow some multifamily, and now be even more. So it's something to consider. Okay?
All right, thanks again.
Anything else on the strategic plan before I'll go ahead and I'll type up a formal draft that you guys can look at. It'll include some action items for them, what we're gonna be doing, so we can start checking stuff off. I'm gonna narrow it down to at least 5, I think, max, and then we'll go from there. Sound good? It will come before you, and then we'll make recommendation changing it, and then we'll bring it back to you for a final vote. Okay? Good? Good.
I'll straighten him up.
What do I got? Did I do something wrong? All right, next up, you ready to go to the next one? Okay. All right, the next one is the, let's see, we're going to the, okay. So I sent an email out to everyone, and this is from a conversation that we had. So Hpvc hired a consultant, LS3P, and they are going through the documents that we provided to them, which includes the studies we did, 2016 Noel Group, 2017 study by Andrew Scott that talked about housing, and talking about rental units. And they're looking through the plan, and they had some questions and concerns that came up while looking through the plan. And that's what I wanted to alert you to before we kind of take it back to HVDC. So the issue I think right now is there seems to be kind of a disconnect between what council, I feel, is saying, what they want with the project, how they want the project developed, and what actually is happening at HVDC. I know we have several members of the HBC here, but just going to say Ken now, or council versus HBC, just to keep it plain. Essentially, there's concerns over the overall feasibility of the project as presented. It looks like the plan, when it was first designed, was to that, as it was being designed, it requires the city, and this is a direct question from them, does this plan call for the city to invest for infrastructure? Because it doesn't seem to work if the city doesn't. And so, as we know, after doing research in the past year, a year and a half or so, that's a substantial cost for the city to be obligated to do. It's about $15 to $20 million for the infrastructure work. And so the question then becomes, does this plan allow for us to have that flexibility? Now, I say that if we, a plan by itself, yeah. I mean, you could take a plan and look at it and say, okay, we need to scale this back because does the area call for this level of density? Does it call for this level of scope and scale? And another question LS3P has is that where's the documentation to prove that it does allow for that? Because it doesn't seem like it does according to what we provided. And so we're at a point now. I mean, we need to be very clear on this. We need to move forward with the strategic. You really only have one shot at this, as recommended by staff and by our new consultant. You don't want to start kind of getting a reputation that the city is not willing to work with you. So we have to put our best foot forward. The issue is that if we make any recommendations to change this plan, the architect, we're leasing these documents. And so I don't want to move forward without assurances from him that this, what we're suggesting, potentially scaling this thing back, will not be unacceptable to him, and then he'll take his plans and go home. So that's where we're at. I need to have some kind of staff, we need to move forward with this thing. We don't have a lot of time. As the RFQ process goes forward, we're gonna be putting out a bid, people are gonna send back their qualifications, then we have to start engaging with them with the negotiation of buying it. We're talking about months and months of process, so we don't have time to do this twice. We need to start moving forward. The indication I'm getting from our loan holder is that no, they do not want to extend it, but that's also just kind of, they want to see some action at this point. So we have a year and a half at this point to get this thing done. So, did anyone have any questions about any of the things? I did provide some questions that I think council should be asking the HPDC. That's, was this fully vetted? When did everyone know about these things? What's going on now? Are there anything else? Because we need to get on the same page on this. So that's where we're at.
Do you think LS3P will need another housing study or rental study to fully develop an
No,
RFQ?
No.
No.
The issue they have is I invited them to come speak as we were requested to have. HBC wanted them to come speak before them, and I invited them to come. They said they'd be more than happy to come, but they had some questions first, which I just asked. And they're going to be developing these into a formal question kind of memo to us, to City Council and HBC, because they had just done a quick look through this thing, and as they were looking through it, not quick, they had just done an initial review of it and noticed these kind of holes, because it looks like the plan, as we decided that we, as council, made it their recommendation through a vote, that they did not want to pay for any infrastructure costs. The plan never changed with it. So the plan still makes it look like we are the master developers of this plan. And when you look at the costs involved with the canal, with the infrastructure work, with all those things, the plan only really works if the city is heavily subsidizing it according to the 2017 plan that Andrew Scott did. Phase A is a $5.6 million in 2017 numbers, $5.6 billion investment by the developer. But that only works, as it clearly states, if the city invests in the infrastructure work. So that could be an additional $3 to $4 million the city has to spend just to get the person to be able to spend that much money. And so when you extrapolate that out to the whole thing, it doesn't work. And so the answer to your question is no, we don't necessarily need a housing study. Typically, the developer knows if they're doing this area, they're going to have to do some research on their own. And we don't have to bear that responsibility to provide a housing study. We should know that stuff, it'd be great. But we don't have to move forward on that, to have that done. The only thing that they do say is that the scale of this thing does not, the documents we have don't suggest that it can support this level of density. So what I really need is, where's the documentation that proves that it can? Not that I need to say that it can't. I don't need a can't, I need a can.
My impression from our discussions in general, but particularly strategic planning, is that all of us are either at least ready to see this thing move forward, or at most excited about it finally becoming a reality.
Yeah.
So, like you said, I think we just need to decide, how do we get this ball rolling faster without it imploding.
Right.
I think everyone wants to see, the public, council, everybody just we're ready for it. Trying to figure out the simplest way to get there.
Right.
Simple being quick as well. As you said, we have a year and a half to finish it.
Right.
It's not even nothing's good. I mean, it won't even start probably for a year and a half. That's not good.
Mayor, I wouldn't disagree with your statement that all of us want to get it rolling, but not all of us are in favor of just scrapping what has taken years to develop.
Right.
And Daniel, that's what I was going to lead to. I didn't see your memo till yesterday morning. You can send it out Sunday, but I got a chance to look at it yesterday afternoon. And I was wondering, when in your first paragraph there, you said, in a recent meeting of HPVC illustrated a deep disconnect between what council and some on HPDC want. And it caused me to wonder if you were taking your cues maybe from just one or two people on council and extrapolating that to say this is what council wants, because I don't think council has come to you, or we have not said to each other what we want. We want the project, but we haven't said how we want it to be in its final tune, Mayor. At the meeting last week that we sat in here, there was a generalization in our strategic planning meeting of forwarding ahead with the big dream, I called it, as it is now, and then let somebody tell us that can't be done. You've got a conversation, you're having these side conversations, you know, with LSP three people, and they're telling you maybe it can't be done. Maybe it can, but the RFQ, as I understood it, is for developers to come in, not to bid the project, but to come in and say, I've worked on things like this before, I'm qualified to do this type of development. And from that, what I look back through my notes, we've always said we would find that list of qualified people, y'all, and then we would choose people to say, you are qualified to bid on this, and then the RFP would go out to those people, and they would come back and go, well, you know, I know what you want, but I can't do that, or I need the city to put in X amount of dollars here, and I'd be willing to do the rest of the things. We had that $15 to $20 million thing kicked around last year a couple of times, and agreed, again, in comments, that that's the perfect world on that if the developer wasn't going to come up with a penny, if we had something. We weren't going to be the master developer. We didn't want to be the master developer. We want to find someone to develop this. So I don't know that that's valid to keep throwing that great big number up there, and it's a scary number. It makes us want to say, well, you know, we better scale this thing back. We don't know that. We haven't put this project out for anybody to look at. We've had one consulting firm to talk about it, but throughout years of doing this, years, not months. And Daniel, like you said, you've been here almost 2 years. If some of these questions were so concerning to you, I guess, why didn't you raise them to us before? If you were concerned about how we got to point A or point B or point C, well, how would you come to us on it? Why now? All this that's what concerns me. Why now? If we've gotten so close on this, is all this stuff coming up to the surface and everything? If these were concerns, why are we just hearing about all of these? It makes it sound like somebody has done something underhanded. I think your memo insulted our former mayor. I think it insulted the former city manager. And I think it insults council in the sense that, at least for the 3 years I've been on here, this is all I can speak for, we have been informed about what's been going on with Hpvc. We've had joint meetings and we have talked. I cannot speak to anything before then, back to the inception of it, because I was on the Hpvc side. But I just, I didn't understand the tone of it.
Sure.
To make it sound like you know that things are good and you're right and we're either not informed or just not correct on things and all. And you know, all these things have happened, and you carve out a plan here that just makes it look like, well, what sinister things have happened. I mean, I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair, Daniel. I don't think it's fair to put it like that. Maybe you didn't mean it like that, but it just comes across as, I don't know, just hit me wrong.
I understand. Well, luckily, so since I've been here, if you'll allow me, I think I have been very clear in these things, and luckily these meetings are recorded, so we can go back and look at all those things.
Okay.
So these plans, these mentions, these things have been talked about extensively since I've been here. And the questions I have are, so we have been working on this for 3 years. Where is the data support we're trying to do? And that's the question. And that's something that we, if we have been working on this for several years, should have known as we go forward. So those questions are legitimate. They're questions that ask, what are we doing? What are we doing? I'm not suggesting that anyone did anything nefarious, but I'm suggesting that we should have had more oversight in this project from the get-go. So, and I think everyone here can agree that oversight, of course, with a project like this, is imperative. And so the question is, where is the documentation that suggests that council was notified that this plan obligated the city to any number of infrastructure costs? Do you have that?
Do you have it? I would ask you, do you have it?
I do not.
I would ask you, have you ever raised a question about the feasibility study for civic design? I've
Yes.
never heard you raise it, Daniel.
I have.
I think so.
Okay. Well, that's your opinion on that.
That's your opinion.
And so the question is, right now, what does council want to do? So, again, we're talking about one person, one vote on either side. So whatever you guys choose as a board, it's fine with me.
You know, I think the next meeting of Hartsville Public Development Corporation, you know, we need direction from this group. Do we go forward and pull the trigger on the RFQ, or do we continue to fine tune the plan? And we need direction as to this body's view on what monies we are willing to allocate toward getting this done. You know, we've allocated a good amount already. We've borrowed a good amount already. And you know, I used the word at the last meeting, impatience. I'm ready to get something rolling. And I look at it, and I express this sentiment, that if you go out and hire a group to do something for you, they're bound and determined to give you some recommendations. None of us are smart enough to anticipate and know everything, every little problem there could be. And HPDC and this body, if they do come back with recommendations, we will vet those things. It's not that they are automatically taken. You know, it may be, you know, nobody knows, you know, how the master plan will be perceived. But again, my fear is that I want to do this one time. I don't want us to have to pull it back and redo it and put it out again. I just think that sends a bad message. So I want to get it right the first time. And you know, any one of us may be the smartest person in the room, but we're not smarter than the whole room working together. So we need everybody, you know, view on this. And you know, if we're looking a year and a half to something actually being put there,
Sure.
You know, that's a lot of lead time. We've got to get started. If we wait another 6 months, it's going to be 6 months down the road. It's not a great time with interest rates going up. It's not a great time with the situation in Ukraine. Who knows, you know, how that will affect the world economy. Daniel mentioned costs going up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if little old Hartsville's having time with costs going up several times, think of the developer or whoever it might be out there. You know, I express the regret. I think we've missed the sweet spot. I think the last couple of years would have been the time to put something out there. You know, what the future holds, I don't know. So that's just me. I am impatient. I do want something to happen out there. I want something positive to happen out there. I think I can speak for the body that we all want it to be a success. Our definition of success may differ, but we want some success there. We've got a multi-county business park there. It's generating minimal revenues because most of it is a empty lot. You know, and the sooner we can get, you know, real buildings there and real businesses and real residences there, that's when, you know, that's going to start rolling. But even that has an end point, you know. So everything, you know, the clock is running on that even. And what was that approved, like 2 years ago?
Which one?
The multi-county business park.
Oh goodness, yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So we've already had 2 years of the multi-county business park of 25
or 20.
25, you know, and we just need to pull the trigger on something and get going. I'm not saying rush into something. I think on a lot of things we've hit the point of diminishing returns. You can tweak something, and each time you get less and less for more and more effort. So, and that's an old economics teacher talking, but you know, you can work on this plan for another, you know, 6 months, a year, whatever, and you get little small incremental changes and incremental improvements, but you know, you're putting more and more time in for less and less results. And that's,
Johnny.
Yes, sir.
To your points, we have relied on professionals from the get-go to do this. We paid over $100,000 to one person. We have a plan now that we could put out there an RFQ and take it to market for us to modify it. We're saying we're smarter than the professionals. We have been engaging engineers. We brought in Davis and Floyd. We've had nothing but professionals look at this thing. They have crafted a plan. The idea was to take what the professionals do, you're exactly right, put that out there, and then let developers come back and go, I can do this, or I can't do this.
And my fear is
But the
that
professionals, you
that
said.
plan developed by those professionals, it may be so above and beyond what a lot of people who would actually invest their money, I'm pretty good about spending somebody else's money. I'm pretty stingy about spending my own money. And I think that's the way we need to look at that. If you got a developer or whoever comes in and makes this project happen, they're spending their own money, and they may say, this is a great plan, but maybe for another place, another time. That's my fear. If LS3P, and I have a hard time saying that, who mixes numbers and letters together, and they've done this before. This is their job to put out these RFQs. If they have concerns, I think it's our duty to at least listen to those concerns. We don't know what the concerns are. I want to hear what they are.
And if I may, I mean, the concerns, I think, with the group that we're talking about here is, how was civic, so that's what my questions were geared toward. How was civic by design picked? What was the criteria to pick that particular group? What was the criteria when we had a study in 2017 that said that we had to expend city money to make this plan work? Why wasn't it then discussed with the council about what is being obligated when in 2019 we go forward, 2019 I think is when we started with civic by design, 2018. That plan was then designed around those premises. And so the city council, looking back through the minutes and things like that, were not brought up to speed on what that would entail, what the city would cost. So you have professionals, yes, we're not talking about it. The design for the canal is beautiful. It's gorgeous, it's well designed. But is it the right scope and scale for this area? And so that's what we need,
Just
that
one way to find
documentation.
out. Put it out there.
Or we run the risk of creating a problem where
When
people
we got
say to us,
LS3P though, we said to them, you guys have expertise in knowing how to write an RFQ. You were first gonna write it. You said you were gonna write this. And then it got pushed over to, we're gonna hire somebody else on that. You said you were gonna write it. You said, I'll take care of this.
Okay.
Okay. So you didn't. So we've got somebody else, we engaged them because of their expertise in it, and that they knew the players, and they would be the one to push it out. We didn't ask them to reinvent the project for us. We paid Tom Lowe and Davidson Floyd, all these other people through the years to come up with the project. The one way to find out whether it works or not is to put out there what we've already paid for.
and then the risk that we have if we put it
There's
out.
risk in everything. There's always a risk.
I understand.
There's a risk.
Sure,
There's a
understood, but
risk.
if we put it out and we waste time, and it does fail, and there's many cities you can show documentation that shows that afterwards, projects like that get a bad rap. I mean, I understand that this is something that people have invested time, have invested their heart and soul into it. But I think emotions need to be taken out of this, because this is getting, it seems like there's an emotional attachment to this design. And
There's not an emotional attachment to it. I was the one that said that the design, I think in some places is a little too dense. I wonder how trucks can get in there. It may not be the right design, but it is the design that we've got right now to go
is it the
forward
best
with.
one?
Huh?
Is it the best one?
But is the conversation at this point, the design, I'm thinking the conversation at this point is city commitment.
Mhm.
That's what I think, if we go to,
How do
nobody
you know
wants
what the
to.
city's committing to without somebody come back and say, you're gonna have to put in this $6 million or this or whatever? We haven't committed to anything.
Well, look, I'm just talking the text of the conversation, the 2017 situation is what he just addressed. If there's documentation that says,
It wasn't here in 2017.
well, that's my point,
We
that's
weren't
what,
here in
that's
2017.
what he's saying. So he's asking, where is it? We weren't here, we gotta find that. I think that's what, because right now we're gonna muddy something, if we can clarify where that came from.
What does it matter why the Civic by Design was chosen? They've been chosen, and we chose to pay them with paychecks.
Yes.
We approved their selection when we stroked them checks for $100,000 to pay for this.
Which is good.
We validated.
Which is good.
The time to do that was before you started writing them checks.
I don't think why is the question. It's that somewhere in there says that plan would be built around the city committing to this particular investment. That was the only question I really got out of the email. That did LS3P ask that question?
Mhm.
So if we get them in the room, right, let HPDC answer that, and then the conversation comes back to council. Knocking that question off the table puts us in the best position possible. I don't think we're talking about scaling back the plan. I'm not sure anybody up here wants to. Everybody wants to dream big. Let's dream big, but we gotta clarify something first. If we can or cannot afford the infrastructural investment, it is what it is.
Right.
I'm on board with going huge. Let's go huge. But if that question is out there lingering, if it's lingering by the professionals, we up here are not smarter than the professionals. Let's hear what they're saying. Right now, we're trusting the conversation from Daniel. If LS3P is willing to come in the room, let's knock out their questions and then move forward from there. But we're gonna insult each other in this room and in other rooms to death. And we're gonna have a point where we can't have a conversation. In a body of elected or appointed officials that cannot have a conversation is a bad place for any city.
But I've been trying to figure out what's the best next step, because I think,
A conversation with LS3P.
again, we're all in agreement, we just want to see this thing move forward.
LS3P and
We
HPVC.
want to take what we paid for and, you know, keep it going. So I think you hit on what is the next best step. Let's, you know, they offer to come speak to us. Let's have them come speak to us and try to get some answers to these questions. It's all part of.
The next first step, I think, would be prudent is for us to, you know, LS3P wants to provide us with some written questions they have so we can start answering things, because that changes the scope of their commitment to us.
Mhm.
So that's what the whole kind of stopping point was to say, okay, so if you guys want us to use this plan, these are the inconsistencies that we see with what you guys are trying to do with so for instance, if we put the master plan out, the document out right now, the way it's written and the way it's designed with the architecture review board part of it, if you read through the whole document, it suggests that we will be the master developer of this and that you'll be coming to us for these suggestions. Again, we pivoted away from that a year and a half ago. And so the document hasn't really been updated. So for them to have to correct that, it's going to take more time, and we did not pay them to do that. We just paid them to go evaluate the document, give us the recommendation on what is the best option forward, help us write the RFQ and help promote it. So what I suggest is we get the recommendation from them. If there are changes that need to be made to the plan in concept, we should either take those or not. I think we should take them because these are professionals we're hired to do the job. If there any tweaking that has to be done, go to Tom Lowe and say, do you mind if we tweak this plan X? If he says, okay, we go forward with everything we have. If he says no, then we have to come back. Because now we're at a point where we have a recommendation for the best option to go forward. City council may want to do that. And then we have to decide, can we use these documents or not? If we push forward with the documents we have fully, what does that mean? Because what we're talking about with scalability, it's a different message I'm getting from the president of HPC, who says we cannot water this down at all. So that's where the disconnect is. You know, we have confusing statements being said by, you know, we have members of this board, we have members of the HPC that are saying things, we're not in unison here.
I got a question. My intent today, before I ask my question, my intent today was just come and listen, because I'm not knowing the new kid on the block. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't have any emotional ties to this project, but I think we need some development. So my first question is, how long 3P been in the game? I mean, first you've been talking to them.
Since November of last year.
November last year, okay. November last year. So, and I think some of the questions they are asking are valid, because I want to see documentation too. I want to see this 2017 study for my own edification, my own knowledge.
Sure.
Is that, can I get a link to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so, That's my next question.
And I don't want to insult anyone on council or anyone on the Hpvc, but we started out with one number, which was $1 million, that all of council was not informed about, and therefore no information or misinformation, you can't make an informed decision. And I see now how we got to the place that we are because of misinformation or no information, and things being changed, and us agreeing to one thing, and then the next time it's changed to something else, or it has not changed accordingly. And I think we need to have this discussion with LSP3 so that we can come to some understanding and clarification about what actually went on. And we have to draw a line. The city cannot afford but so much money to put into this project. We don't want to water it down to where it becomes a big playground. We want a quality project over there. And I think everybody on council wants to see the same thing, but we, at some point, have got to come to the realization that what the city is able to afford.
I think our first question to LS3P as well is where their opinion on this come from, and more qualified. I mean, let's throw it out there.
And that's what, so did they go out for a bid process for somebody?
For the LS3P?
Yes.
Oh, no. This is just looking through the plan and reading what it says.
No, nor did Tom Lowe, or, so.
Or other engineers, Davis and Floyd recommended.
Davis, okay, but we have a concept, and we don't know, because like everybody in the room said, we're not professionals. So we went on someone's plan and ideas without knowing the temperature of the water. It was not bid out. These were all recommendations. And right now, recommendations have gotten us in debt, and we don't know if we're gonna be able to keep the plans or not. If he accepts a slight change, or if he wants to pull it because of that slight change. So, I mean, we're in a bad position here.
Right, I mean, the contract did put us in a bad position, which again was done. Say our city attorney, Lawrence Flynn, on the thing, made recommendations which were not taken. And so the contract was signed and approved by Hpvc. That put us in a position that if Tom Lowe does not like our direction, does not like the overall intent, or if we've misused his thing, it gives him wide authority to take his plans, because we are leasing them. So we have spent $100,000 with this company for the last 3 years. And he could take it tomorrow if he so chooses with a 7-day written notice. And so we have completed the contract and put ourselves in the best position to use the plan in some capacity, because I think that this plan, going out in the way it is, the concept, showing this big dream that we want, maybe scaling some things back that are not feasible, like a canal. If that is deemed to be something that's going to scare off an investor, when you show them the water system they potentially have to build and or maintain and develop a circulatory system for it, if that's a concern to an investor, why would you put that into development? Or maybe just put it in as this is something we want, not we need. And so as you put these things forward, you develop the best foot forward to get this thing moving forward. And so with the months of negotiations there to come with the RFQ, and then, because with the RFQ, once we select our request for qualifications, then we start negotiating with the price with them. We don't have to go for RFP because it's already been, we selected our potential person. So to move forward with that, we have the best option going forward. Let them come back to us and say, this is what we can and can't do. But we only really have one shot at this point, because again, if this had been processed 2 years ago, a different conversation. So,
Well, we don't take any action here, but I think we all want to hear more of what L3PS is.
sure, and this was just a brief thing to give you guys a heads up what's coming down the road. They had concerns again about what direction this project is going, because then we have to update our scope with them, essentially pay them more money if we want them to go. If we want them to correct some of the inconsistencies they see in the plan, then we need to potentially pay them more. If we want to move forward what we have, then kind of tweak the plan we already have within the current documents, then that's less. So I think they're going to be submitting this week. They should be submitting something to us to review.
Great.
Send it out to you guys, then we invite them down to come talk. The goal here, I think, though, is City Council is the main oversight for this project at this point. Hpvc is the owners of the property. They're going to be the ones voting on whether or not who they sell to, what they do things at, but council maintains majority vote on that board. And so your guys' will needs to be the one that kind of dictates where this project goes.
And why would we not want them to correct inconsistencies?
It's a very good question. But that's all it really is. I mean, at this point, we need to, I think it'd be helpful for city staff as we move forward this thing to have a clear direction from the group. I think we have talked about a lot, and we do have a resolution that from city council passed directing which way they want this to go, but not spending money and things like that. But as we move forward with the RFQ process, city council can make a recommendation of what they want to do. And I think that'd be very helpful as we move forward.
Well, now, Daniel, it might have been just talk, but, when they mentioned about the water features and the little bridges over the road and all that kind of stuff, Johnny, somebody presented us with like a price tag, like $15 to $25 million, and we knew that wasn't gonna happen right off the bat.
Right, yeah.
And so I thought we were further along, just like when we left the addition the other day. I was under the impression that we were on the same page, that we were going to get a plan, start sending the RFQs out. I thought the tweaking was gonna be a part of it regardless of we would get the concerned questions answered or whatever. Is that not the way, it's not gonna be either you take our plan or go home. Isn't there gonna be some tweaking going on?
Well, that's what I believe. Sorry, that's what I believe was the the action. That's what I've been going based off of those conversations that we have. I mean, again, council doesn't. You've met in workshops. You haven't voted formally on these things, but you give.
And I think that's what we need. We need a resolution expressing council's point of view on this. That way, there's nothing ambiguous about how we feel.
Sure.
And a resolution can be passed with one vote, and we can show HPDC the resolution, this is the direction council wants to go, and that way there's no question. And we can, wordsmith the resolution to, whatever we're comfortable with saying. But it needs to be out there.
That'd be very helpful. Because I believe that too until our last HPDC meeting where I did feel like there was a disconnect.
And I may have been the cause of some of this because I knew that we had not passed a resolution, and when the question came up whether council was behind what I was saying, I said, I can only speak for myself. And that's just not go-to. If council hadn't expressed their opinion or passed an ordinance, it's just Johnny Andrews' view. But if we've passed an ordinance or we've passed a resolution, then that's council's view. And so maybe I'm the cause of some of that ambiguity, but I'm not gonna, try to put words in this body's mouth without y'all voting on something and approving something. Yeah. So I think a resolution, encapsulating our view as to what we want to happen next would be very useful.
Johnny, I don't think we've done that at all, try to put words in any council member's mouth, but as a council together, how many many times has the HPDC come before council?
And none I know of, but,
Hmm?
none I know of, but, you know,
How many joint meetings?
we've had one, and that was,
The last 2 years.
at the addition,
Mhm.
yeah. And that was last year, maybe?
That was
It was
recent.
last year.
Yeah, that was
That's
last
the
year.
entire time we've had it, it was the first time we've had one.
Yeah.
So so there, right there, is a breakdown, because you've got this grandiose plan, but it has not come to council as far as money. HPDC has, well, let me say it like this. I think there was one asked for money for $50,000.
No, so just recently, so up until this past year, city council, they just obligated $30,000, but we have obligated funding.
Right.
This entire time, the city has paid the interest on the loan since it was created. And so the first time the city has obligated additional taxpayer dollars for expenditures related to HVAC costs with design work, so that was $30,000,
Yeah,
which we have spent.
right. It just, when you have entities that are working, with council, they need to bring something to council, not something for council to formally vote on. Otherwise, there's just, well, I don't know.
Excuse me, when you say they, you talking about HPDC? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let's,
It can't be I mean, we have representation on the HPDC board, but that board still has to come before council, because council has to sign off on whatever we do. And if we don't get the right information, then we'll go nowhere faster than it's taken this many years, we won't ever get anyplace.
And my impression is that, we all want all our boards and commissions to move
Yeah.
quickly and decisively, and that's, sometimes a dream that doesn't happen. So I was wondering if a resolution from this body concerning maybe the big things, you know, do we want LS3P to continue, and will do we want them to have recommendations? And here again, a recommendation is not necessarily a change until it's approved. You know, is the city willing to commit money, additional money to the project, or is that an open question? You know, whatever the sticking points are, we need to go ahead and tackle those, because I think until they're tackled, it's gonna be the same old, that we're just turning our wheels.
But we gotta see it in writing, and they gotta make a presentation, and I'll give you a perfect example. Look out at the, Hartsel Garden apartments, or by Walmart. As you all remember, they wanted to give the city the road, and I saw that they bought the road, okay? They bought the road. That's the only way that I would vote for that. And I told them, there is no lighting there, so you have to put lighting. So they gave us a plan with 18 lamp posts in the fairway from 5th Street to 4th Street. There's not a light out there. There's 4 or 5 lamp posts on the right-hand side coming from 5th Street. And as you make the turn right, there are 4 or 5. But they're not lit. So if you don't get something in concrete and then you don't have it. You just don't have it. Now, we did the Walmart place the same way, going to Walmart. We built it, we built Walmart out there, and it is pitch black. How did we do that? I don't want that, the Canal District, I don't want that to be like that. And that's what it is right now, it's muddy water. And the only way that we're gonna get to the place we need to be is that we see it clearly for what it is, and we vote yea or nay.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to spend any more money than we've already spent. Sure. Whatever we've got, I got confidence in Shannon and Daniel. They've done all the heavy lifting. I want to see what it's going to take. I understand what Bobby's saying. Let's put it out. In a perfect world, this is what we want to shoot for. I'm not a developer, so I don't know what plan will or won't work. And I'm hoping that the minds can get together and hammer this out, Daniel. Because I just feel like any plan that comes back our way with the RFQs, we're gonna say, well, it looks good, but, or they're gonna say, I like this, but, and it's just going, just like a residential. I don't know what's responsible for the buyer or the seller, infrastructure-wise or whatever, so I have to rely on them telling us. But as far as us being able to put millions of dollars of infrastructure on 4th Street, it's not gonna happen.
Do they need that commitment from us at this point?
Well,
Well, we won't know that until,
well, yes and no. I mean, so if we present so it's how we word it, and that's what we've been talking about, it's how we word the document. So if we put out the plan for Civic by Design in its whole entirety and say, this is what we want, then what you're signaling is that they need to provide something that looks like this, and to get it that looks like this, okay, let's run the numbers. So how do we provide the rentals to be at, $1,000 or something like that? Well, we have to reduce our costs. So now it's, well, are we gonna build the canal for you and waterways? Well, if you guys do that, then we can get to where our price point is. That's what the study that we have alongside of those things that we paid for, that's what it suggests. If you're gonna build this, you can get to this price point, but these are the things that the city has to build for it to get to that point. So that's what we have, those are what all the documents we have right now, that's what it says.
that
So-
they have to do it according to the project. I mean,
Well,
the
in order
plan.
in order for us to get this, you have to do this, and the city would
So
have to.
there's no
do that.
language we can put in it, say, or work,
Well, what I would suggest.
layman's term, work with us and let's get to a,
Yeah, I mean, what I would suggest is you put out so you can put out the overall design, but not maybe the language that ties to it. So all the different, infrastructure for the design codes and things like that, because now you're really adding costs to this thing. Put it out as concept, right? This is what the city dreamed of. The goal here, though, is that if LS3P comes back and they do make a recommendation saying, guys, if you put out that you want this Grand Canal like this, and I'm using the canal just because it's the easiest one to kind of look at. If you put out that you want this Grand Canal, and that is a requirement, then that potentially can signal to different developers that, hey, I don't do canals, so I'm not going to touch this thing. But I do maybe I do a pond in the middle, and I can handle that. So it's just how you do it. The question, the main concern I have is, of course, the Tom Lowe contract issue. Because any recommendation that we get from anyone, it doesn't have to be LS3P. We can go, if we don't like what LS3P says, we can hire another consultant, we can hire another consultant, and they can all tell us what they want. But at the end of the day, any recommended changes, if he's not okay with, we could risk losing the entire concept as it stands right now. So that's my concern, is that I don't want to put out something that signals the wrong message to people. I want to be flexible, because that's how you do get projects done. You have to be willing to work with somebody. If you put out, this is the hard line what we want, which is the language I'm getting from, again, the disconnect I had with the president of Hpvc right now, is that there's no room for any removal. Now, he is one vote, and that's okay. But if you go that route, the inflexibility, that's where you can scare developers off, and that's where we run the risk of being a city that has a reputation for not doing it. And we work so hard to protect this reputation. We want to be business friendly. So we can't be business friendly with everything else and then not with our own projects. And so as we get the recommendations, I'm going to, you guys will accept them or not, to go back to Tom Lowe and talk about it with him and see if he's willing to accept these changes. If he is, we move forward with everything we have.
So Tom, look, that's
That's
city by design. So I was under the impression that once we wrote that letter to him, we pretty much own all.
We put ourselves in the
documents.
best position. He just,
But we still boxed in though.
that contract, yeah, with all our
But the
documents,
contract-
these documents tie us to him for these things. Now, we don't have to pay him for anything, which is what the goal of that letter was, really.
Oh, we don't have to pay him anything.
No,
He can
we're
still
not-
take
we
it, he
finished
still can
our-
take his ball and go home, you know.
Potentially, yeah, I mean, he has, and we'd have to argue that in North Carolina, which we can't do, so.
Daniel, in your memo, the 18th of February, where Pete just talked to it, Lawrence and I have developed a very simple solution. It says it eliminates the potential risk of expensive arbitration and litigation by Civic by Design. But we were going to pay him for what he's done going forth, and it said it protects our investment by allowing us to use the documents for the canal project without risk of Tom revoking his license to the material.
If we use them to use them as they're designed, yeah. we
Well,
can do
but
that.
it doesn't say anything else that, you know, if we don't use them as designed, so we pay him for it. I think that the impression that I had, maybe not everybody else, was that we were paying Tom, that we were paying Tom and saying goodbye to Tom, and we were gonna have the material that we had paid for, and then it was up to us to see how to use it. It
And that was-
doesn't say that if we
Yeah.
didn't use it the way Tom drove it, we paid him for it. And we've cut off all ties, we're not asking anything else. Did we do that?
We did it, and then the only thing that's changed at this point is OSFP has introduced new information, that this plan is maybe not as salient as we hoped. So there is concerns that I have with the plan as we've talked
But
about.
how's the blowback coming to Tom? That's what I'm trying to understand you, Daniel. If we've cut our ties with Tom, how does Tom have any say on LS3P may say the way Tom wrote it, you can't put it out there because it puts you as the master developer, although we moved away from that a year and a half ago.
Right.
So how do you raise that issue that Tom is still?
I got a quick question
concerned?
before we get an answer to that.
I like- how-
No,
how do you-
I want to finish, but can we discuss legal opinion in open session? Because the answer to that is going to be the conversation with Lawrence, right? Yeah,
Well,
well,
no, it's a valid question. I mean, the concern is that we are still leasing these documents. If we use it as intended, that's what the contract says, as we lease the documents. We don't own them. We can use them for the process, or for the project.
And Bobby,
Because
that's the key piece of information.
We
Yeah.
accept his
Other
draft
words,
materials
trademark.
as final and
They're
approve the
trademark.
completion of his scope of services. So how does
I'm
he?
sorry, I didn't hear you.
Your sentence says the HPDC board will accept his draft materials as final
Mhm.
and approve the completion of his scope of services at HPD.
Right. And we
From
have-
there, the documents can be released publicly and we can use the materials in the RFQ.
Absolutely.
So if we can use them and we have to change them according to LS3P or somebody else, this says we can use them. It doesn't say Tom has any right to say what we can do to them or
Well,
not.
my
Maybe that
concern-
should have been in there if that was the case. Maybe that wasn't what we were.
Well, we can use the documents as in the RFQ. That's exactly what it can do. The only thing I would want to make sure, just to cover our bases, is to say if we were to change them, confirm to Tom that he's okay with that, because that's what it does say in the contract. So that's just covering our bases. I
We
wouldn't
don't
want to
have a
move
contract
forward.
with Tom anymore. We've severed that contract.
We leasing the documents.
And that's the key piece that I didn't realize that in the contract we were
There's
leasing.
nothing here that says
Right,
release.
that we
We're
were-
talking about
that we owned it.
clarification and communication. There's nothing that indicates we were.
And I hadn't read the contract, so that's my.
that's the email from February?
That's fine.
This is from just last week.
All right, so, but now I'm curious, we're all aware of the original contract. The original contract says lease in it though, correct?
Yes.
I understood from Lawrence's
We
opinion.
terminated the lease.
Yeah, we terminated the lease, and that was my point. Lawrence's opinion was the original contract, if it was used, with his recommendations would have protected us with the lease documents if severed. Us giving him the notice as the contract stands, the contract that did not have his recommendations, says that if we use them as they are, there is still the potential later on for potential recourse.
Yes.
With his recommendations, there would not have been, but that contract wasn't used.
So the issue we had with Lawrence's recommendations is that, without his recommendations rather, is that if we continue down the road where Tom was having the ability to, enter into conversation with us, he was being contacted about different things going on, then we ran the risk of him potentially exercising the lease in the contract. So that was what I was mainly concerned about. The clause in the contract where he could, with 7 days written notice, terminate the contract on us, and we had no recourse to it. By ending the contract, we have paid him for what we wanted. We completed everything like that. It eliminates one potential avenue to do it. He still owns the documents. And if we so choose, because he owns it, we can never get away from that. We never will own these documents no matter what we do. And so that is just the risk here. And so any type of tweaking of documents is just something to protect ourselves and cover our bases. We've done everything we can with a very horrible contract to protect ourselves as best as possible. But like anything, nothing's foolproof. So that is the only thing that's the difference here. And we have some L3P new information that's come in that suggests that, yeah, maybe this design isn't as good as we had hoped. And so that's what's going on.
Well, we can't do anything really here, but we all want to see what LS3P has to say. So
Well, and that's great. I mean, that's exactly what I want. I just wanted to alert you guys, because that's my responsibility.
yeah, and it may be impressed upon them that we'd like to see it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and her plan, Julie, who's working on it for us, her plan was to have it to us. Hopefully, she's going to have it hopefully done by tomorrow or sometime like that,
Cool.
hopefully this week. So I can get something to you guys and Hpvc and give them the opportunity to give you guys the opportunity to see what they're talking about. Maybe we can have some answers that come from that, and then we can go back and invite them to come down. Because what I don't want is them to come down and for us to not have an answer for something. Because this is, after all, our project.
Yeah, I
That's
appreciate
And
what
for us to be fragmented.
Yes, ma'am, exactly. But I understand, I have a courage there, what you guys are talking about, my direction at least.
So we'll wait on the schedule meeting.
Well, I plan on having at least something before, if we can have something beforehand, that's great, if not, next workshop.
To me, the sooner the better.
Agreed, yeah. If we call a special meeting, we can
I
definitely.
mean,
do
they
that.
come in with solid answers and data, I'm fine.
Sounds good.
Well, canal was the last thing on the agenda.
Open session, yeah.
Yeah.
We have, executive session now.
You understand?
Right. I would entertain a motion, if anything else. Okay, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Second, got a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in executive session.